Hi everyone, this is Selvi. Today's topic is what is Burndown Chart? It's a very interesting topic, I can say. In this episode, we are going to discuss about what is this chart and how this chart gets displayed and how to understand the details from this chart and what are the things that we can predict from this chart and how this chart is going to be really helpful. Now, let's start from what is the burn down chart. As the name suggests, burn down, work completed. So, this chart is going to help us in understanding the amount of work that has been completed in the sprint duration, as well what is the remaining work pending in this sprint. It's very simple. So, if we take a sprint length of 10 days, so it's a 2-week sprint. Now, in this 2-week sprint, anytime if I see this chart, I can understand how much work has been completed and how much is remaining. With this, how to get this value, how much means in what way I can understand, that is the next thing. The very important point here is we can use this representation of chart in two ways. Now, I request people who are listening this episode to take a piece of paper so that we can quickly draw on the paper what we are trying to understand, so that it will be very useful for you to capture the topic. Now, in this example, we are going to take the length of the sprint as 2 weeks. Now, the time frame of these 10 days gets displayed in the x-axis. And in y-axis, you can use any of the two things. What are those two things? One is either you can use the story points or you can use the hours. Story points, it will come from the work items that you have estimated with the story points. Like a user story, you would have said 3 user story points, 2 user story points, 1 user story point, 8 user story points. That value is the user story point. Hours means it will get to the level of task, because user stories we will not be estimating in the hours basis, we will be estimating task in the hours basis, because task is the lowest level of work item in the overall hierarchy, where a task generally, what is the general principle when we create a task? We generally create a task in such a way that the task will not flow to the next day, which means the task should get completed within a day or maximum a day. So we will be generally putting the estimate of the task in hours. So we have two options. Just to remember one thing, in y-axis always it is the estimate value. The estimate value can be your story points or it can be hours. I'll tell you what is the advantage of story point, what is the disadvantage of story point, and what is the advantage of hours and what is the disadvantage of hours also. So now it is very clear. I am going to again tell, because it is a very important topic. Burndown chart is a chart which helps us to understand the amount of work that has been completed in the sprint, as well the remaining work in the sprint. Here we use a chart where in x-axis we represent the length of the sprint. When I say length of the sprint, we put all the 10 days as 10 points in the x-axis, and in y-axis we will be using the estimate value. The estimate value can be user story point or it can be hours. Now let's try to understand what is the advantage of putting user story point and disadvantage of user story point. Generally in Agile we use user story points for estimation, correct? So we are not going with any kind of accurate estimation values like hours, days, minutes. We are not going into that level. What we generally do, we generally put it in the user story points. Now, when I say we will put it in the user story points, this is one advantage because we don't get into so much detail of hours. Then it is like too much of tracking, right? So we generally estimate our stories or the work items in user story points. The same estimation values we use in the y-axis. This is the advantage. Disadvantage is, let's consider an 8 story point work item. It starts on the very first day. It goes till 8th day. So till 8th day or 9th day or even 10th day, till the last day you are working on that particular work item. What is the whole idea of this chart? We want to understand how much work we have completed and what is remaining. But what will happen here, on the very first day, 8 story point remains 8 story point. Second day, 8. Third day, 8. Till the last day where we are closing that story or the work item, it will remain as 8 story point. So with this representation, what we will be able to understand, whether it is going as per the plan or we are not on the plan, how we will get to know? We will not be able to getting to know. The reason is, from first day till 10th day, there will not be any reduction in the story points. 8 remains 8 till the closure of the story. So the whole purpose of this chart is to identify and understand how much work is done, what is remaining. But how I am going to get with story points, for example, with 8 story points, one work item is there, how I can understand? I cannot understand whether how much work has been done. No idea. Whether it will be closed on last day? No idea, because it is on story point. So here is the challenge. This is one disadvantage. Now coming to the hours. The advantage is exact opposite of what we discussed now. If I put 8 hours, the very first day I have completed 2 hours. So I'll be keep updating what is remaining and what I have completed in task level. So what will happen here, in 8 hours, I'll be able to understand, okay, on 4th day, we have completed 4 hours. Oh, fair enough. So 6th day, okay, 6 hours completed. So 2 hours is remaining. So 2 hours of work is remaining. That level detail I'll be able to get if I put it in hours. But what is the challenge here? We need to create task and we need to add the hours appropriately, and we need to ensure we are setting the estimate on the sprint planning exactly with what is the value required, how many hours required. This is a challenge, right? So what generally we can do? First, let's try to understand that also. So we first understood what is the chart and how it is represented. Now, before getting into so much of details, let me try to explain about the advantage of this particular chart so that I can get into much more details about user story point and hours. Then it will be much more clear. So first thing is, what is the purpose of this chart? The purpose of the chart is very simple. Anytime during the sprint execution, anytime anyone who is part of the project, they can go to the tool and open this chart and they will be able to understand how the team is progressing, whether all the planned work items will get completed or already there are challenges and deviation going on, or as of now everything looks calm and fine. These all details you can learn from this chart. So the purpose of the chart is, anyone who is belonging to the project, they can open this chart from the tool and understand how are we progressing the sprint in the sprint. Now this is okay. This is the purpose of the chart. But now we need to know how we can understand from this chart about the progress. Then it will be better if we get into the next level details. As I requested, I believe you have a piece of paper in front of you. Please draw x-axis and y-axis. As I mentioned, we have 10 days in our sprint. That means we are using 2 weeks as the length of the sprint. Let's start like we are starting from January 1st to January 14th, whereas it includes 2 weekends. Okay, so consider 10 working days. Put all those dates, 1st January, 2nd January, 3rd January till 14th January in the x-axis. Now let me explain with user story points, then I'll get into hours. Okay, in y-axis we are going to use user story points, which means the estimation value here I'm going to use is user story points. Let's sum up all the user stories or the work items that we have estimated in the sprint. We have some around 30 story points overall that we have committed. Okay, committed story points in the sprint is 30. So put in the y-axis till 30. You can put it in the variants of 5 also, like 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 also, so that you can easily understand. So in your x-axis you have put the dates from 1st January to 14th January, and in y-axis as our total committed story points in the sprint is 30, we have put 30, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. Now, first day, the graph starts at 30 because 30 is our committed story points. Nothing has been burned yet, correct? So 30. Now let's take first day. First day, one story point has been completed because there was one story point related work item the team has committed that has been completed. So that graph will come down to 29 on 2nd of January. 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th we have not worked, means we have worked, but sorry, we have not closed anything. We have not completed anything. Suddenly on 8th of Jan, we have completed and closed around 20 story points work. So already we were in 29, 29 minus 20, that means now it will come to 9. So directly you can draw a line on all the days between 2nd Jan to 8th or 9th Jan. It is all about the same 29 points. There was no reduction at all. Nothing was completed. We were working, but we have not completed and closed any stories or work items. So the line was the same with the value of 29. Suddenly on 8th of Jan or 9th of Jan, let's take 9th of Jan, we closed around 20 story points related work items. So 29 minus 20, it became 9. So suddenly it came to 9. And remaining few days, like on 14th of January, we completed and closed all the work items, and finally we came to 0. That means at the end of the sprint, what is the expectation? Whatever we have committed, we should burn everything. We should burn in such a way that all the work items are completed and closed, so that we will reach to the level of 0. That is the whole idea how this graph is getting prepared. Do we need to prepare this graph? No. All the tools, whatever we are using, it can be Jira, TFS, all the tools are coming up with this inbuilt feature for Burndown chart. So it is very simple. Always remember, In x-axis, you have the time in date format, and in y-axis, you have the estimation value in story points or hours. We will talk about hours now, estimation values. Now, very beginning, whatever the committed, if it is story points, whatever the committed story points in the sprint, that is the first day it will be with. And every day, how you are burning the user stories, which means how you are completing and closing the work items accordingly. That many number of story points will keep getting reduced, and at the last day, it will be 0. So this is about a normal scenario. Now let's talk about hours and then come to some other different use cases as well. In hours means what will happen is, in x-axis, the date, the overall time period of the sprint in date format, which is the same. Y-axis, it is in hours. What are the hours here? All the tasks that we have created inside each and every committed work item, that sum. For example, user story A, we have created some 3 tasks and it is 30 hours we have planned. Similarly, every work item that we have committed, we would have created task and we would have estimated that in hours. When we will be doing this? We will be doing this on the day of sprint planning, before we start the sprint. So before we start the sprint in the tool, whatever the work items that we are committing, we should create all the task breakdown. When I say task breakdown, we should know what we are going to do and what is the estimate in hours that is required for this task. So now we will be summing up all the estimate values which are in hours for all the tasks related to the committed work items. And let's say, for example, 150 hours that we have in total. So in y-axis, it is 150. You can put it like 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 110, 120, 130. So this is your y-axis. On day 1, what is the value? 130. Day 2, you have burnt around 30 hours. So from 130, it will come down to 100. Similarly, every day, whatever the hours you are burning, accordingly the graph will come down, and that will show how much effort that you are burning, and finally it will reach 0. This is the whole point with respect to hours. We need to understand certain points here. It is very, very important. 2 things. One is, you should plan what is the estimate that is required for a task on the sprint planning day when you are creating the task, and after entering that value only, you should start the sprint in the tool. There is a start sprint button in the tool, right? We should prepare all these things. We should have all the tasks ready. I'll say what is the issue if we are creating the start sprint and then do all this work. I'll talk about that as well. So what we need to do, whatever the work items that we are committing, we should create all the relevant tasks inside it, and for every task we should give the estimate value, which should be in hours. This is point number 1. Point number 2 is, at the end of every day, how many hours we have burnt with respect to the task we should update. Using what? There is an option called remaining hours. For example, if my estimate is like 10 hours and remaining 4 hours I'm entering, that means I have burnt around 6 hours in this day. That is, today I have burnt 6 hours. Like this, I will be keep updating every end of the day. If I'm not updating, what will happen? The tool and the graph will not represent the right information, because when I'm not updating, what will happen? It doesn't know how much I have worked. So what will happen? 130 will remain as 130. It will not go to 100 the very next day, because I have not updated in the tool that I have, as a team, we have burnt around 30 hours. So it's very important. We should update the tool with the right value every day. So again, I'm just highlighting advantage and disadvantage of using the story point. As I mentioned, now you would have came to know with story point, every day you may or may not be able to complete and close the work item. So there will not be any reduction in the story points. So what will happen? We will not be able to understand what exactly has been completed and what is remaining. Whereas if it is in hours, it is very easy for us to understand, okay, for the very first day, we have completed 30 hours. Remaining 100 hours of work is pending in this team. So in this way, it is easy for us to understand with hours. But what is the right approach? To go with story points or to go with task? If the team is new, we are building a new team, we are with a new set of people, and our product is new, we are into very initial phase of our execution. In these cases, it is always best to create task and understand this concept, because reviewing this Burndown chart in daily stand-up meeting is very much important, so that every day we know how our progress is going on. Are we on the right track or not? Those information we will get to know from this chart. We have some more benefits. I'm going to discuss about that. But let's talk about this topic, whether it is important to represent it in story points or hours. So at least in the beginning days, it's very important how this is helpful to understand how are we progressing. And as a new team, there can be challenges, there can be scope changes, there are situations where we have not planned it at all, but there are things coming as blockers. So all those things are actually visible through this Burndown chart. I'll talk about that, how to understand that as well. But these all things are very important in the initial days. But when we are as a mature team, we know the product roadmap, we know the product in and out, the things and how the execution is happening, and we are very much clear, and we don't see scope changes because we have a very dedicated plan and we don't see lot many changes coming in, and we have a very detailed roadmap where we are much aware of the things, and very minimum or zero level changes are coming in during the execution. So at that level, you can switch to directly the story points. And another thing is also, it will be really helpful when our user story splitting is at very, very high level, which means we are as a team, we as a team are able to guide the product owner, and product owner is also having the detailed information, so he or she can split the stories in a very, very detailed level, like not even like 8 story points, 1, 2, 3, that kind of very detailed level of stories, which are very, very small. If that level of splitting is happening, then also it is beneficial. So in general, for teams which are new, where we need certain time to settle down, team is new, product is new, our execution pattern still we are learning. So for all those things, it is very important we start creating task, and from the task level we estimate it in hours, and then we try to understand the things in Burndown chart with the help of the hours estimate. That way we will be understanding the purpose of this Burndown chart, and it will also help us in learning many things. Whereas when we are getting into a level of maturity in the team and product is also well established, there are minimum and zero level of changes, those kind of things, that situation, we will be able to split the stories also in a very detailed way, so that the estimation is not high. In those kind of cases, it is always beneficial that we go with story points. Initial phases of the project, when team is new, splitting of user story is also not happening. It's little challenging to get into that level at the initial phase. So always take a step, go into detail level, so that tracking is also easy, understanding the progress is also easy through the Burndown chart with the help of the hours. When as a team we know the grip, we have the grip, we know the details, then we can go with story points in the estimates. Now, what we can learn from this Burndown chart as a pattern? Overall, like for example, like 3-4 sprints, like I always say pattern as one of the important keyword in tracking, because if it happens for only one time, there can be a specific reason, but if it's every time, if it's happening as a pattern, then we need to really understand there can be a very important reason which we may need to fix. So from this burn down chart, what we can learn as a pattern? Three things I want to mention here. One is always, okay, always this from this burn down chart, we are able to understand we are completing the work items before the sprint time. That means on 8th day or 9th day itself, the story points or the hours value, the y-axis value becomes 0. That shows that we may be under committing our work for the sprint, or our estimation may be too high. We are overestimating or under committing. There can be two reasons. Next, always at the end of the sprint, we are left out with certain story points or hours, which means in y-axis, anytime on the last day, the y-axis value is not 0. There can be some value. If it is happening as a pattern for 2 to 3 sprints, always there is some y-axis value. It is not 0 on the last day of the sprint. That means either we are underestimating or overcommitting the work items in the sprint. We can overcommit, right? Okay, we will do this, we can do that, yeah, like that we will be keep adding so many items. Or in the estimation, always we estimate with low values. We are not right with our estimation. That can also be one of the reasons. So that shows that we are overcommitting or underestimating. So now we understood about two things. If this kind of pattern is keep happening, we will be able to understand about the issues that are happening either in our estimation or during our sprint planning, our commitment. So if these two situations are happening, we can learn from the burn down chart. We need to fix either in the estimation or in the commitment, or maybe both. Third situation, always we see for a few days there is a flat line in the graph, in the chart, and suddenly there is a reduction in the value from, as I mentioned, for 5-6 days there is no change at all. Suddenly on 7th day, 30 or 40 hours reduction. That means team is really not updating the values or the work items every day. So it is very important that we should follow that practice of every day updating the work items with actual values. So that's the very important key. If we are not updating, then this chart is not going to help us. So these are the three things we have understood. Three situations, and if this is happening as a pattern, we should really want to understand how these things are happening. Now, from this chart, what else we can learn? There are a few more things to learn. I talked about how the graph is getting represented, but the tool gives us one more option, because this chart is getting generated by the tool. So tool gives by default one option in the chart, which is called as, what is the guideline? What is the guideline means? We have all the data available in our tool, correct? Which means from which day to which day the sprint is going to run, and what are the stories or the work items that we have committed, in which what is the total number of story points that we have committed if we are representing in story points, or what is the total number of hours that team is going to work. Everything is available in the tool. So this tool itself will suggest, hey, this is the guideline. Every day if you start working in the actual manner, because in our tool we have the number of people who are working, we have the sprint level information, we have the committed information of the work items, we have the estimation details, everything is available. So the team itself shows that there is a guideline. So what it will show, from 130 hours to 0 hours to reach on 10th day, how that graph should look like for everyday basis. It will show a proper guideline line in the Burndown chart. What is the use of this line? This line helps us to understand certain details. Whatever the graph I was talking about, that is called our value, actual value, correct? Remaining value, whatever the value that is keep burning down, and how the day by day work is getting completed, and what is the remaining value. That is how that graph, with the help of the values, it will show. This guideline on day one itself, it will show in a different color. In general, for example, in Jira, it shows in gray color. Okay. Hope everyone is in front of the paper, what we have discussed. So please draw a line that connects from 130 to 0 on the last day. Just a normal line. Put it as a guideline. And now, our actual line, okay, that is the remaining values. What is the total work done? What is the remaining work is available? With that, actual line will get represented. There are three options. Okay, the first option is, if the graph, okay, if the actual value, the graph, when I say the actual value, the guideline is anyway, it's a constant line, it will not change because you have given the data, so accordingly it is giving the guideline, it will not change. According to our data, daily updates in our tool, the actual line will vary. If our actual line is going as per the guideline, that means we are on track. Okay, we are going as per the track. That means as whatever we have planned, every day we are showing good progress. So there are high chances that at the end of the sprint, we will be able to complete all the committed work items. Second thing, if our actual line is below the guideline line, guideline is a gray color line, right? That guideline is above our actual line, or let me put it in simple, our actual line is below the gray line, which is the guideline. That means also we are in a very, very better shape to close the committed work items in the sprint. These all are predictions. I am again telling, it may or may not happen because we are doing this in the mid of the sprint, right? Every day we will be doing this activity, right? So if it is as per the guideline, our actual line is going as per the guideline, then there is no deviation. So high chances that we will complete the sprint successfully. If it is our actual line is below the guideline, then also there are high chances. Why? Because when it is at the top, That means the story points are high, the hours are more, still we need to work more. But when we are going below the guideline, that means we are well in advance, we are going much better than actual guideline itself. So that means we are completing the work much faster. That means there are high chances that we may be able to complete the sprint successfully. What if our actual line is above the guideline? That means we are somewhere deviated. That means there are high chances that we may not be able to complete all the committed work items in the sprint. So these are the three situations. The guideline is provided by the tool itself, which is taken or which is drawn with the help of the data what we have already shared in the tool, which means start date and end date of the sprint, estimation values, and the estimates what we have provided. With all this information, it has given the guideline. On the guideline, below the guideline, above the guideline, where our actual line is coming, with that we should understand whether we are on track or we are not on track. Getting the point? So this is very important. Now, in the actual line, okay, there are so many ups and downs coming. Ups and downs, when I say, we have started with 130 hours on day 1. Second day it is going to 135 hours. And third day it is going to 140 hours. Then suddenly on fifth day it is coming to 120 hours. There are 2 chances because of which this may happen. First chance is there are scope changes coming in. When I say scope change, product owner is looking for some additional things that need to be planned as part of the work item, because of which some more task got added, because of which the extra hours has been added. So there is an increment in the hours value. Obviously it is the same with user story points also. Maybe 3 user story points work item would have been increased to 5 story points, or 5 story points would have been increased to 8 story points, but there will be an increment. This is chance 1. Second chance is, on the sprint planning day, we have created task and we have added the estimation values in hours. For example, for task 1, I have added 5 hours. But on second day, I added 5 plus 5. That means I thought that I missed something and I wanted to increase it, or I added an extra task where it got added as another 5, because of which it became 10. So there is an increment. So first thing is, if there is a scope change. Second chance is, if the team member is updating some task with values, because of which the values will change. That is the reason I mentioned initially, when you are on the sprint planning day, you should prepare all the tasks, you should estimate it properly, then you should click on start sprint button. What will happen if you are clicking first to start sprint button? The tool thinks that, okay, these all are the tasks and these all are the hours, and it will prepare the guideline. And then you keep on updating task every day basis. That means it looks like there is a scope change, or you are keep on incrementing your estimations, or you are keep on adding the extra task. That's the reason it is very important you should prepare all the tasks that are relevant with the right estimation value. Sometimes it happens, but it should not be a pattern. Every sprint I'll keep on adding on day 2, 3, then we will not be able to predict anything. What is the whole purpose of this? This is my whole set of work I have on my plate. Everyday basis, how am I traveling? That is the whole purpose. So if I'm not having that initial target on the day one in the right way, I will not be knowing how I can even measure where I need to go, where exactly I'm at the target, I am actually going on the right pace or not. I cannot understand. So that's the whole reason you should ensure that you are creating all the tasks with the right estimation values when we are getting into the sprint planning time, and add all the details and then start the sprint. So if there are spikes that are coming up in the burn down chart, that means there is an increment in the value. Two options: one is there is a scope change, second is the owner of the task has either incremented the estimation value or added a new task and added the estimation value. Now we talked about all these things. What is the advantage of reviewing this task every day? The advantage is we can very well able to understand. I no need to get into each and every task to understand whether we are on track or not. As a whole, as a team, where are we? Okay, it's not going, it's above the guideline, then we can very well understand there is a high chance we may not be able to complete. And now just update this information to the product owner and get his or her support to prioritize certain things, whether how things are going on. You can get into a detailed level because of this chart. If this chart is not available, as a team, as a stakeholder, we will not be able to understand how the progress is going on, whether we are on track, either it can come as a surprise or shock at the end of the sprint. We may achieve, we may not achieve, but here we have a track how things are going on, and there is also a guideline which is guiding us whether high chances of closure or high chances of spillover. So in that way we are preparing ourselves. What are the things that we can manage within the sprint? What is the mitigation plan and how it is going to impact? So all those things can be prepared because of this tracking. That is the whole advantage of having this, and this should be mandatorily reviewed by the team, not only by Scrum Master or Product Owner, with the whole team as part of the daily stand-up, so that we understand what actually happens in our team. How are we progressing in the sprint? So we talked about sprint with the help of Burndown Chart. Burndown Chart can also be used at epic levels, features levels, so that we can understand in the epic level where are we progressing. I'll try to talk about that as well in the separate episode, because this episode itself is a very long episode, because we have covered each and every detail of Burndown Chart in detail. Please, when you hear this episode, again I'm mentioning, maybe after hearing also, take a piece of paper, draw a Burndown chart and understand the concept. And I'm also going to plan for a kind of questionnaire session. If you have any kind of questions, I'll definitely announce those details soon in one of the upcoming announcement. But any questions as of now, please park it. I'll be soon sharing that announcement on how to reach out to me if there are any questions on any of the episodes what we are discussing. I think this episode is really an interesting episode and a very, very important episode as well. I hope this would have helped most of you in understanding about Burndown Chart in detail. Thanks everyone for listening. Happy learning and stay tuned.